Hello and welcome to Nigeria, the Road to 2019, a series of programs where Arise News places the audience and the choice at the heart of our coverage of the upcoming presidential elections. I am Christian Ogodo. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, all the news, comments and analyses that provide unrivaled insight into Nigeria 2019, including efforts to persuade PDP lawmakers, especially those in the House of Representatives, not to disrupt the presentation of the 2019 appropriation bill by President Muhammadu Buhari proved abortive. The drama took a different turn as the president addressed lawmakers. It was interrupted each time he mentioned an achievement by his administration. We'll speak to a political and governance analyst to make a sense of the budget presentation, and if it is yet another hollow ritual. As the campaigns are beginning to shape up, both the APC and the PDP are at loggerheads to draw the voters to their sides. Since the Buhari-led administration tabled yet another multi-trillion naira budget, the PDP caucus in the National Assembly has thrashed the appropriation bill. The lawmakers are accusing the government of lack of vision in managing the economy. But with the recent data from the National Bureau of Statistics showing unemployment rates to be at an all-time high, has the APC administration failed or not? But first, let's take a look at what happened at the National Assembly yesterday. Our State House correspondent, Abel Ejikeme, reports.
A very rowdy joint session of the National Assembly welcomes President Buhari's budget proposal of 8.83 trillion naira for the 2019 fiscal year. Buhari's budget presentation was intermittently interrupted by disorderliness. The budget was prepared on the assumption of $60 per barrel with crude oil production of 2.3 million barrels per day.
The 2019 budget proposal is intended to further place the economy on the path of inclusive, diversified, and sustainable growth in order to continue to lift significant numbers of our students out of poverty. The underlying drives of the 2019 revenue projections have been adjusted to reflect current realities. On the expenditure side, allocations to ministries, departments, and agencies of government were guided by the three objectives of the ERGP, which are: 1, restoring and sustaining growth; 2, investing in our people; and 3, building a globally competitive economy. The 2019 budget proposal is based on the following assumptions: A, oil price benchmark of $60 per barrel; B, oil production estimate of 2.3 million barrels per day, including condensates; C, exchange rate of 305 naira per American dollar; 4, real GDP growth of 3.01%; and E, inflation rate of 9.98%.
The president reads an overview of his administration's economic developments. The president says his administration prioritized the completion of critical ongoing projects over the introduction of new ones. He says his administration met 116 abandoned projects in the Ministry of Water Resources relating to irrigation, dams, drainage, and water supply. He claims his administration has completed or commissioned a number of the projects. His claims are punctuated with boos from anti-Buhari lawmakers and overwhelmed with applause from pro-Buhari lawmakers.
In the railway sector,
Rivers State, tell us.
we completed and commissioned Abuja Kaduna Rail Line and the Abuja Metro Rail Project. Similarly, the previously abandoned Itape, Ajakuta, Wari Rail Line is undergoing test run and will soon be commissioned. We are also on track for the Lagos-Kano Rail Line, a significant progress. We are also on track for the Lagos-Kano Rail Line. A significant progress has been made on the Lagos to Ibadan segment of the project. We remain committed to rebuilding and expanding our road network. In 2018, an additional 1,531 kilometers of roads had been constructed and 1,008 kilometers rehabilitated across the country. Priority projects such as the Abuja, Kaduna, Kano Highway, as well as second Niger Bridge are well underway. Through the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund. In every state in Nigeria, today there is a major federal road project going on.
For some of the lawmakers, it is a mixed grill of achievements as reeled out by the president.
Well, I think every Nigerian will not be happy with the president's budget presentation because, for obvious reasons, the 2018 budget has not been implemented, and then we are coming with 2019. So we wonder what is going to happen, and they always claim that there is no money. So we've been asking where the monies that have been generated by FIRS is. The one from the Eurobond, the one from JAMB, WAEC, and then so many others.
The high point of this budget is to tell us that he is not intending to abandon any of those projects that were started by the previous government, which is not what we used to have in the past. Even in my local government, you see people who come in, and because they were not the people that started the project, they will abandon it and go and start another one and call it their own legacy. And the point is, this legacy, which money did you bring to do your own legacy?
It wasn't more of a classical legislative environment, because for everything you do in the legislature, we were expected to listen to every speaker in silence against the rules. But for whatever it is, probably maybe because of political atmosphere, some people are overtaken by such emotions and everything. So it becomes a partisan thing on both sides. To me, it wasn't totally very acceptable.
This was the venue where President Muhammadu Buhari presented the 2019 appropriation budget to a joint session of lawmakers from both the Senate and the House of Representatives. This was done amidst boos and cheers from lawmakers alike. How soon will this budget be passed? With this friction between the lawmakers and the executive arm remains a very big question on the minds of Nigerians. But the bottom line remains that this budget is for Nigerians. The president has also revealed his willingness to finally implement that of the 2018 and carry out projects that have been abandoned, according to him, by previous governments. We'll only wait and see if this 2019 budget will be passed anytime soon. Abel Ejikeme, reporting for Arise News.
Well, let's speak to Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, who is a diasporic and strategic communications scholar and a senior lecturer, in fact, the head of mass communication department at Bayes University, Abuja. Is also a public policy, political and governance analyst, flowing from his vast experience as a former journalist with the Guardian newspaper and as a former World Bank consultant. He joins me now in the studios, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. Nice to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Christian, once again. Yeah.
Sure. It's quite an auspicious period to have you here,
My pleasure.
like we saw in that report.
Yeah.
Let's begin first, leaving the budget presentation, but the attitude of the legislators in receiving the president in their chambers. Would you describe that as classical or unclassical, becoming or unbecoming of legislators?
Well, thanks again for having me on, Christian. Like you said, there are different perspectives from which you can look at it. You can look at it from the context of crowd psychology. You can also look at it from the perspective of how legislators are wont to behave, and it doesn't matter which country we're talking about. Then again, you can look at it from the perspective of partisan politicians that they actually are. The first one is to say that heckling has an history. Heckling is not peculiar to any kind of person. It can come especially when you're talking to a large audience, to a crowd, to an anonymous and heterogeneous audience. And the crowd has a unique characteristics, and it revolves around fragility, it revolves around anonymity, it revolves around a feeling amongst themselves that there's a level of safety. Identification is always very difficult when you're talking to a crowd. So they take some risk, and they're very feeble. They're also very fickle. They take some risk in a group, believing that they can hardly be spotlighted. Okay, so that played out yesterday. Very respectable individuals, very distinguished group of people. Again, you cannot deny the fact that they are humans first and foremost, and in that environment, they're partisan politicians. So that one too also came into play. Okay, trying to express themselves in the way in which they felt or they feel from the perspective, from the point of view of their political groups. Okay, and having said that, really, we can also look at it from the angle of the fact that, our president, this is not the first budget that the president is going to deliver in the National Assembly. It's about the third or the fourth, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the first time that we're going to have this kind of a thing happen. Okay, it can be sending some kind of signals, which means that, okay, there has been an increased fracturing in the polity over the last 3 to 4 years, and the only place it can be expressed is in the hollow chambers of the National Assembly, because these people, they are a gathering of, multi-dimensional set of Nigerians. They are representatives of the people, so to say. So they are reflecting the feelings of the average Nigerians. By the time they are gathered in a particular group. So it is possible to say that we have witnessed an increased fracturing, okay, for different reasons. It is not to say that whether the president has done well or that he has not done well. It may not actually reflect anything, but it's also a new introduction to the Nigerian political system, whereby a president, number one citizen, is talking and is being heckled. And finally, on that point, Christian, it's not something I think we should belabor too much. Every great speaker in history have been a witness to one kind of heckling or the other. The great Martin Luther King, I remember, was heckled at a time, and after heckling, it led to one of his best speeches, one of the best speeches so far, the I Have a Dream.
Yeah,
Harold Wilson has been heckled, Bill Clinton was heckled several times, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, Donald Trump.
Even Theresa May.
So
right now,
heckling
with the Brexit,
is the character of a crowd. And in this case, it can be reflected in the legislature, which is also a variant of a crowd. So there's no big deal. It's not something we should belabor. We should actually definitely move into the substance of the matter, which is the budget that we have at hand.
And that is what exactly we're going to do now, because the president reeled out a lot of achievements. Okay. He had said that his administration, with the slimmest opportunities or resources, they've been able to achieve so many. It's a budget of 8.8 trillion naira. Dr. Abiodun, I just want you to make a quick review of the 2018 budget performance of just less than 1 billion, that's 1 trillion naira of what we're having today.
That's right.
Should we be going up, having increased budget when we know that the prices of the oil price in the international
not stable,
spot market, yes, is dipping. You get the point. Even the non-oil revenues, although it's been projected that it's going to come to almost, is it 3.73 trillion naira?
That's right.
But where are the incentives, for the industries, for manufacturing? Score it against the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics latest data.
Okay, that's all right, Christian. But we need to also understand that the budgeting process, budgeting is an estimate. It's a projections on what a government wants to do in terms of income and expenditure. So by and large, it's an estimate. It's not a mathematical thing. It's not something that you can say it's scientific, or that you can talk about with elements of sense of exactitude. That's why they are always based on assumptions. But there are also some assumptions that we'll have to bring in, that we'll have to play up, to ensure that it becomes successful.
Absolutely.
Okay. The amount of budget is not necessarily. I don't find it's as very, very important as the kind of mindset that the government put to the implementation. Okay, because history has shown that we are characterized with the development of very good budgets. We have never come short of that. But our problem has been implementation, policy somersault. How conscientious are the implementers? How determined are we going to be? Is it a kind of budget that will again be characterized by corruption? Is it a kind of budget that will be characterized by the circumvention of processes? Is it the kind of budget that will be characterized with self-appropriation, self-aggrandizement, where people will see the public fund as their own, where people will allocate resources, allocate jobs, allocate contracts to themselves at the expense of the populace, where mobilization will be given and people will help themselves with it and forget about doing the actual job. How ready are we? Are we really reconscientize ourselves? Are we actually reorient ourselves, have our leaders reorient us towards a readiness to do some kind of proper implementation? As for the amount, it's also good for every government to be ambitious. 3 years ago, it was not as much, it was not as high as this, just as it was 2 years ago. It was not also as high. Now we are having a very high one. This is very ambitious, which is okay. And like I've said somewhere else, I'm not also bothered about us borrowing to implement this budget, but are we really going to use the money that we borrow to actually do the things we say we're going to do with them? Those are my fears. Government has come very heavily. They've told us several things that they are doing in the area of infrastructure. This is okay because you need investment in infrastructure to stimulate the economy, to reflect the economy, a kind of economy that is essentially consumer-based. So you need this kind of heavy spending on infrastructure to create jobs, provide facilities for the private sector, to power on. Okay? If we witness shortfall in this area, there's definitely going to be a problem. So we need to get our priorities right. The assumptions are okay as they were, okay? But again, we have to make another assumption that our leaders will be conscientious, will be determined, okay? Not just to put the budgets through the mill, but to ensure that the cycle flow correctly.
Okay, the cycle flowing correctly, maybe would have to start taking the budget sector by sector, that is the sectoral allocations. I know that the Minister of Budget and Planning hasn't given a breakdown of the entire, budget
I think it was supposed to have been done today, right?
Today, yes, absolutely. But let me just take you to one that has become a recurring decimal, which this government said in 2015, during one of its campaign promises, was that petroleum subsidy, was going to be eliminated. In 2018, we've seen the government, appropriating without legislation over $1 billion or thereabouts or more from the Nigerian liquefied natural gas to subsidize petroleum products imports. That's over ₦1 trillion. Now again in 2019, they are saying that, listen, I quote the president here, let me also take this opportunity to address and clarify the under-recoveries or subsidy on petrol in a period of, recovery. Well, the government says it will be spending over 300 billion naira
305,
for
I think.
305 billion
Yeah.
for under recovery or
Yes,
subsidy.
that's right.
New lexicon here
Yeah.
in petroleum product subsidy.
We'll keep seeing them because it's a very critical sector. Lexicons keep coming up every day, and somehow they will peter out, or they will fade out if problems that created them in the first instance get resolved. So this might just be another one. Okay, but for the subsidy question, it's a fundamental question. I remember when I was in school, we've gone on riots over introduction of petroleum subsidy because it's a very sensitive thing that once you remove it or you add it, it has a way of affecting the amount of petrol, PMS, and you know how important this is to transportation, especially in our kind of
There's
society.
a snowball effect to
Absolutely.
everything.
There's a multiplier effect,
yeah.
a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It will always be there. But there's a question I would actually want to ask around it. This government is not new, to the controversy around subsidy, and they came in, on the pedestal of coming to provide some kind of redemption. Yeah. But perhaps, I don't know, maybe they're not doing enough explaining. They're not giving us enough explanation, probably.
Why they retain subsidy and
and
why subsidy is shot beyond the skies now.
There must be something behind it that we don't know.
Well, let me quote again what the president said in his speech. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's right.
It says the problem with subsidies in the past is abuse and corruption. Okay. Today, the government through NNPC, the NNPC is the sole importer of PMS and therefore under recovery from the NNPC's trading account. This means the possibility of some marketers falsifying claims is removed.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay, that probably explains part of the question.
Yeah.
That they are now satisfied that it's no longer fraught with corruption, and so they can retain it and save the populace from having to pay higher on transportation.
Don't you find some contradictions here?
Well, what I do know, what I do understand about governance is that it's a very tricky process. It can be very complicated. And no policy statement, no policy direction should be cast in stone. Okay? Sometimes they can be subject to reviews. Okay? You make some reviews and you proceed from there. I'm not trying to justify what they are doing, but I'm just saying that perhaps we need more explanation.
You're not looking at the...
Perhaps we need more communication.
You're not looking at the refineries.
Well, it's a weather-beating issue. It's an issue that is very tiring, very sickening. Sometimes when you want to talk about it, you'll be wondering why we cannot get things right in this country. We had refineries, we cannot maintain them. We made attempts, we spent billions on turnaround, and yet we've not been able to do anything about it. And now we're hoping that a private person, an individual, is developing one. We're hoping that will liberate us. It's so funny. Then if that is the case, why don't we just concentrate on the development of the private sector as against the public sector? Is anything wrong with really selling them if it's going to make our system work better? Because if we are shifting from all our refineries and putting our hope on an individual who is developing one, then why don't we, from a more holistic, from a more general perspective, empower the private sector so that they can energize our economy better?
Are you thinking of privatizing them?
Yeah, because most economies are actually, most developed economies are private sector led. Okay, even the former socialist communist societies, are now private sector driven. So the question of mixed economy that we used to have in the past is no longer the case. So if privatization is going to be the way forward, there are stories, there are reports, World Bank reports and all that have been done that proved that countries of the Southeast Asia, the Asian tigers, were prepared to development through the instrumentality of the private sector. Okay, there's nothing wrong with us going that direction, but we cannot do it half-heartedly. It has to be full. That's it.
Well, if you talk about that, maybe the president has a point there when in 2015, November 17th, he launched an agricultural revolution called the Anchor Borrower Scheme, you understand, to revitalize the entire agricultural space in this country. And it talked about diversifying the economy. And only yesterday, the Anchor Borrowers Scheme, the central bank, who are the drivers of that scheme, had a gala night where they appreciated the president for creating 12 million farmers. And out of this 12 million, you know, substantially you have grain farmers there, like the rice farmers and the rest. How would you, you know, score the achievements of the government in this area?
You know, by the time when they were coming in, really, one of the things they said as well was that Nigeria need to move from the monoculture, from our monocultural, you know, from our dependence on oil alone that we needed to diversify. So it's possible that they moved into the agricultural sector to stimulate it in the spirit of diversification. So it's all right that they have achieved all these, they have said that they have achieved 12 million additional jobs, and they have even used that argument to counter other arguments that there are no jobs. You know, they have said in circles that 12 million new jobs have been created essentially through agriculture. It's a very good development. It's gratifying, you know, if it is actually real, if these things are not just with every due respect.
You are even talking with doubts. I mean, you're a Nigerian, you go to the market, so
because
people go to the market.
We saw statistics from MBS yesterday, which counters it a little bit, you know, from our own understanding. You know,
that's very worrisome.
Yeah, because
isn't it worrisome?
2018, you know, that's where we are witnessing the highest number of unemployed. So it tends to counter the other narrative.
20.3 million.
Yeah, so it's actually, the contradiction is worrisome, and there has to be some reconciliation at some point. But the fundamental thing I was driving at is that whatever any government can do, whatever any responsible government can do to diversify the economy, to expand our economy and take it away from these monoculture, this sole dependence on oil, it's welcome anytime. You know, because I don't know how long oil will continue to be valid as a commodity, even in the global market, you know, and especially even at the utility level of it.
Nigeria's proven oil reserve is put at to run out at about 50 years or so.
Definitely is very important.
And what happens at that time, you know, would be not just a conjecture. Would still be talking about that. You're watching Nigeria 2019. We're going on a very short break. My guest is Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, who is a World Bank consultant, a diasporic personality, political analyst, you know, and lecturer at the Bayes University.
Most importantly, I'm a lecturer at Bayes University.
Okay, I wouldn't forget that. Well, stay with us while we go on a quick break now. You're welcome back. If you're just joining us, you're watching Nigeria 2019, and with me in the studios is Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. We're taking an overview of economic developments in the last 3 years and a half. It's been very challenging, both at home and abroad. And of course, when you look at commodity prices, both the oil and non-oil sectors, they've been really volatile. Global trends, be it security, trade, or politics, have also been unpredictable. And here in Nigeria, we've had to cope with disruptions in oil production and exports, security, and devastating floods. These are the words of President Muhammadu Buhari and the rest. Do you think that with the 2019 budget estimates, with all the aggregations of the factors that they know have hindered development, that 2019 is going to be an El Dorado for the Nigerian people?
Very well. You know, we started, Christian, by saying that, by agreeing that budgetary estimates, you know, are not, they are not mathematics. You know, they are not things that you can deal with a sense of exactitude, you know, to a very large extent, you know, because economics in itself is premised on a condition. Basic economics will tell us ceteris paribus, which means all things being equal.
But and things have never been equal. They've never been.
That's what the assumptions are speaking to. Let's assume that all these things are stable. Let's assume that, you know, dollars will sell at 60, oil will sell at $60 per barrel.
That's in fact what the government hinged the 2019 budget.
That's fine. And let's assume that we'll be able to produce 2.3 barrels per day.
Million barrels
Per day.
We've never
which
gotten
means,
to that mark.
That's fine, which means that there will be peace in the Niger Delta. Okay? There will be flooding and all those kind of
environmental disruptions,
which will not
natural causes.
These are things that you can actually find it difficult to determine. You may not be able to determine these things with a high degree of exactitude. They are projections. Okay, but it's also good to work towards ensuring that these projections come out in a realistic way, to ensure that these projections come out true, and how can the government work towards it? And by being conscientious about it. What's causing disturbance in the Niger Delta? Are we thinking about them, or have we stopped thinking about it? Do we think that the amnesty program is just enough to solve the problem? Do we think that the Niger Delta Development Company is enough to solve the problem? Do we think that 13% derivation is okay? If all these things are not okay, can we think of more things to placate them? Can we work towards improving the loss of the people, from where the golden egg is being laid? We have to be conscientious about this. And if we're making any effort, if we're making real efforts towards these things, are we hearing from them to be sure that they are satisfied with the efforts that the government is making? Because no matter how you look at it, they are playing a very critical role in the life wire of this country, in the continuous existence of this country, because there's no system that can function effectively if your economy is weak, if your resource base is weak, if the source of your income is unpredictable. There has to be steps need to be put in place so that we can guarantee the smooth flow of this monoculture, even if it is something that we want to do away with. Yes, we want to diversify, but for now, it is what it is. We have to fester it, we have to do it well, we have to tamper with, ensure that it works well, so that our projections, like the 2019 budget, can
come to fruition.
So, that's fine. It's also important to mention the question of insecurity.
Well, I was going to ask you that, but go on.
Thank you.
The government says it has achieved tremendous success in the areas of insecurity, particularly in the Northeast. But only just less than 70 or about 72 hours ago, the former chief of defense staff,
Salibade, was assassinated.
Assassinated.
It's a very unfortunate thing, but you also know that security is a very delicate thing. It can be very tricky, very problematic, and even the military high command, have told us several times that it's not a symmetrical war. It's an asymmetrical war, which means that it's not a conventional kind of war. It's a guerrilla kind of war, attack, and they disappear. Probably, even if they were trained in the war colleges on how to deal with asymmetrical war, I'm not sure that they will anticipate it to come in this country the way it has, the way we have witnessed it in the last 9 to 10 years. So it's still something that they are grappling with, and it still remains a myth how the terrorists have been able to sustain themselves up to this time. How the terrorists have been able to withstand the mythical, the almighty Nigerian army in the last 9 to 10 years. There's still something that we still cannot understand, because we are a very powerful nation, a nation of nearly 200 million people, the largest black nation on earth after Brazil, and one of the most populous, one of the strongest economies in Africa. Lagos alone, the economy of Lagos alone, it's equal to the economy of many African countries combined.
But don't forget that is really being slowed down by not just congestion and the traffic and the rest.
That's fine.
Building up.
I'm building a track to an argument. And because of our humongous potentials, it's mind-boggling, it's surprising, it's overwhelming to see that some group of miscreants, so to say, ragtag army, can hold us down for this long. It's surprising, really, because we have, you give our military people, you give them the utmost respect for all they are doing thus far. But even then, you still want to ask questions. Why have we not been able to deal with these people? Well, that's in the Northeast anyway. But what about pockets of insecurity that we see, that like the assassination, kidnapping, you know, on the road. Sometimes you can't even travel from Abuja to Kaduna because you are scared. You don't know what will happen to you.
You know, we know of Kaduna here.
Kaduna, Lokoja, you know, you're afraid of going Kogi State, everywhere. Insecure. Why is this so? Then again, it will come down to the question of the kind of police that we have. You know, if the police is not strong enough, can we not empower them further? If we are not well police, what's wrong with recruiting more policemen? You know, what's wrong with including?
Is it the number that matters here?
It also matters.
Is it the deployment of digital technology?
No, it's all combined. Yes, it's all combined. There are multiple factors that will play out in this business. Okay, it's not just a unilateral thing. You know, multiple factors, many factors will have to come to play. But the point is, I don't want anybody to tell me that we don't have money, so we cannot maintain a larger number of police. We are under police, as it were. And I'm not even sure we have a number of army, a number of rank and file in the Nigerian army. And nobody should say that we don't have funds. We have funds because we waste a lot of money every day. And we see it everywhere. That's why I keep saying that at some point we need a conscientious leader, a determined leader that will change our value orientation. Okay, our orientation for now is a perverted one. You see a lot of waste in government. You know, if there can be greater prudence, if there can be greater accountability, okay, greater management of resources, I'm sure we'll be able to save some money, you know, to do some of the structural things, some of the things that we need to do to build our institutions that are supposed to help in bringing security in our people, institutions that are supposed to help in propelling us to the next pedestal that we're supposed to be. You know, so, but for now, I think that I will agree that the president has tried at the level of anti-corruption. It doesn't matter what people are saying, what some of the opposition, some other persons might say, but in my own opinion, I think that creating an increased awareness around anti-corruption, it's also something that is...
With what some critics call media trials of these people?
Look, we're in a very difficult country, you know, difficult in the sense that, you know, it's either if we don't want to legislate corruption, if we don't want to agree
enough legislation on corruption,
but if we don't want to say that let's accept that corruption is legal, then we just have to continue to do something, no matter how marginal. Something will have to be done. We have to continue to do it, no matter how marginal. You know, except we want to say that let's legislate corruption, you know, because it's endemic, it's systemic, you know, and if you just say you want to relax on it, okay, then we are done for. So it's okay that attempts are being made in the first instance to increase awareness around it. And from awareness, of course, we can start a re-conscientization on the downside of corruption. And maybe at some point, Providence can step in. And we may get a leader that will completely, mercilessly, and without sense of determination, march us out of this quagmire that we are in.
Well, the quagmire of corruption and the downturn in the economy, like you pointed out, may have, you know, been accentuated by squandermania on its own. And that's why sometimes it is very difficult to blame the ordinary Nigerian because he's not really seeing good examples to look up to, whether at the community level or at the national level. Yeah. And that is why the president, I'm quoting him again, he said, "We are most encouraged by the improved performance of the economy." And he says this shows it is, you know, doing very well. But in 2018, you remember the World Bank, you're a consultant with them, the World Economic Forum.
I used to be a consultant.
Yeah, you used to be a consultant. Officially, you know, made Nigeria the world headquarters of extreme poverty, not just poverty. So that's why sometimes you want to look at what is being reeled out as economic achievements. You want to listen to some people who say, look, we're 12 million farmers strong, and that's why we're supporting the president to run again. Reconciling, you know, these issues would become really difficult. I don't know.
I agree with you quite right. It's quite a shame that that statistics came out, you know, that report came out against us, you know, but statistics...
But they are everywhere. I mean,
no, that's fine. I'm
feel it everywhere.
No, I'm not. I'm not disputing it. You know, but these things are not permanent things. You know, they are not permanent features. They are things that shift. If Nigeria is the headquarters of the world today, I'm coming Christian. If Nigeria is the headquarters of the world today, nothing says that we cannot move tomorrow, that we cannot move the year after.
Doctor, we are deteriorating. That is what that report is saying. At a time we were, far above the baseline, but now we're really nosediving in a very fast manner.
So if we are deteriorating, what should we do? We should rest on our oars.
That's what
we should shack our responsibilities. Yeah, we cannot rest on our oars. We cannot go and sleep in deterioration. We have to take the report as a call to action, okay, and be more conscientious about steps that we are taking to pull ourselves out of this wood. Okay, when Buhari came in, we dipped into recession, isn't it? And a year after, we were out of it. And another year after, we grew higher. So there's a report now that says that we're the poverty capital of the world. And of course, you see poverty around. Go to Yaya, go to places around us. Go to Yaya, go to Karu, go to Kaduna Road. You see poverty all over the place. You know, and you even feel the poverty from your own personal circumstance. Okay? Because you're doing an elite job, for instance, I can imagine the number of requests you get every day from people asking you for help. I can imagine the number of account numbers you have on your telephone. Okay? You can imagine all these things. So it's a reflection of the kind of poverty that is around us. But my argument is we cannot rest on our oars. Okay? Leaders must be much more conscientious. Leaders must be ready to minimize the kind of waste that they indulge in with public funds. Public funds need to be treated with a high level of accountability, high level of transparency.
Dr. Adeniyi, are we putting those innovations, laying them on the ground right now with the budget expose presented by Mr. President to the National Assembly yesterday?
To be honest, when you are the president of a country, I'm not sure you are supposed to do anything different other than trying to motivate the populace, motivate them, give them a sense of hope, give them a sense of promise, and do let them know that we're not at where we want to be yet, but there's going to be a better tomorrow. Okay, that's why he was talking about budget of continuity. But again, that's the best that he can do, and I think he's doing it. But let's not forget that your program says Nigeria 2019. We're headed towards elections.
Yeah.
If the populace feels that they're not convinced enough that they can do it, that they can deliver the job in a continuous situation, we have another option next February to change him. Okay, and there are so many of them along the line. We have so many of them that we can choose from. Okay, but what he needs to do is what he did yesterday. To try to galvanize the populace. To motivate them, to give hope, to give promise. And to assure us that he can do it. But there are many Nigerians who have come out now to say that they can do it better. The stage is set. We can assess them on our own and make our choice. That's the beauty of democracy. That's the opportunity that another election has offered us. And the ball is now in our court.
Yeah, the ball is indeed in our court. And maybe let's move slightly away from budgetary issues now.
Yeah.
You had said they are like permutations, you understand, that no hard facts about it.
Yeah.
But in developed climes, they have hard facts about how growth is going to be measured.
Sure.
If the economy is going to grow 1%, they tell you these are the indices for that measures. But as looks like a Hirakiri situation here.
It has to be so because you said developed countries.
Should it be so?
No, just a second.
When Nigerians keep talking, 58 years, a child of 58 years, you're still saying he has potentials?
Let me tell you something.
When we're living in secondary schools and before we're given our certificates, the testimonials they give. I don't mean the one that was presented recently. Your principal will say, based on your performance for the 5 years you were in school, they'll say, very likely to succeed. Some will just be likely to succeed.
That's right.
And come ça, this might succeed.
But what is the size of the Nigerian economy? What is the size of our GDP? What is the size of our budget compared to the budget of one conglomerate in America? So by and large, Nigeria is a small country, it's a poor country when you compare it to some of these developed countries. But the beauty is that we have them to learn from. Okay, but the shame again is that we're not learning fast enough. That's
Even
the
when you
difference.
have most of our elites, being
That is it,
educated abroad,
we're
you
not-
and I
yeah,
know,
we're not learning
we're
fast
elite
enough.
scholars.
Yeah, at the level of individuals, you could say that, okay, Nigerians are doing very well.
Why are we
but
not
at the
aggregating
corporate,
it? Yeah.
at the macro level,
Yeah.
we're underperforming. That's why the place of leader will come in. We need a leader who will really galvanize us. Many of our leaders, some of them have
So
come.
the problem is followership.
For me, I think it's both leadership,
Leadership,
and
rather.
large and partly followership. That's my own argument.
So the
but
Nigerian-
I'm saying that it's not that to say that all our leaders in the past have been bad, but somehow one thing or the other have limited them. We've had very good leader who was limited by megalomania. We had another one that was limited by death, and yet another one limited by death. Another one was limited by corruption, and we have yet another one limited by nepotism. Okay, so we've been having leaders with good intention, but you also be told that good governance, development is not brought about by good intention, but implementation.
Absolutely.
So we need proper implementation. We need leaders that will see things through, and the place of the leader is very key. Somebody has defined leadership as order-centered relationship, order-centered behavior. Okay, up to a very large extent, most of our leaders have placed the self above the order. That's our dilemma. But I hope that we'll be able to right that wrong at some point in time.
That's in February when the Nigerians have the opportunity, you understand, to choose some new leaders or re-elect other new leaders. Now let's look at that 2019. About 60 days or so to go for the elections, and we're not seeing the usual frenzy around electioneering, even though we have about 73 presidential contestants.
There's so many reasons, really, and it's very, very interesting, ironically, that the usual frenzy, if I have to borrow your word, the enthusiasm, the rambunctious excitement we used to have, it has not come into play. So many reasons can be adduced, really. One, it could be that somebody thinks that he will definitely be returned, or somebody that he will win. I'm not saying that's the situation. I'm just making a conjecture. It's a suspicion. The other one could be that the other one feels that, well, I don't have enough money to match these people, so how much do I have to throw around? Let me just try my best. So maybe that could also be a reason for the lethargy. And some other persons may be thinking that, well, we don't have enough structure, to upstage or to upset these two behemoths in the guise of political parties. So different feelings really may be coming out to play. But most importantly, we need to focus on INEC, the umpire. They have a role to play to deliver a new president to us.
A massive
Yeah,
role.
they have a role to deliver another president to us, so to say, whether the incumbent or another person, after 2019, after February next year. That's important. So we need to focus on them. We need to wish them well, and we need to remind them of the responsibility that they have to the Nigerian people. I'm not concerned about the politicians as much as I'm not concerned about the excitement, or the enthusiasm, among the politicians, among the contestants. But as far as we know, some people have come out to say they want to contest. We have their names. They're with INEC. Let's have something new. And if we're going to have something repeated again, there must be a reason. And of course, the Nigerian populace will decide ultimately. The important thing is that let's consolidate on our democracy. The gains we made in 2015, let's consolidate on it so we can propel ourselves to the next pedestal as a nation.
Okay, you avoided using the next level. Because well, key into all the permutations, the anxiety into Nigeria 2019, is the populace. And if you look at the poverty index and the various indices in our kind of politicking, where vote buying is taking center stage now, do you think the populace will conscientiously, they would have the ability to determine, you understand, leadership that will serve their purpose? If we put the slogan, of a hungry man in this perspective?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and it's very unfortunate, really. That's why we also shouldn't be unfair to ourselves sometimes when we markedly compare our own democracy with those of the industrial nations. Those countries are sophisticated countries. Those countries, have some things in place, okay, for their citizens. Some of the things that you and I need in this country, the answers to those things have been provided by those countries. So the basic things that we are looking for, that the average Nigerian is looking for, is no longer the issue in advanced democracies, in civilized countries. So it is the reason why we shouldn't be comparing ourselves very sheepishly with them, But within our own context as well, back to your question, how do we deal with this thing? How do we get our people to be able to think properly, okay, not to be carried away by the handouts that the politicians will give them? I don't think it's something that we'll achieve overnight. It's going to take time, it's going to take processes, it's going to take procedures. The states will have to be much more responsive. The government will have to be much more responsive, to provide, to develop institutions of health, institutions of education, institutions of security, okay, and institutions that will provide job for the populace. By the time all these things are in place, or even way above the level at which we are now, then the populace, individuals, will begin to have some sense of satisfaction, some sense of contentment, and they will start looking away from handouts. They will start shifting their mindset from believing that the politician, the political leader, is representative of the state, and as such should be giving them those handouts for them to survive. And instead, they will rely on the state and the government to provide structures for them that will guarantee their existence.
And uplift
because
them.
That's fine. That's how it's supposed to be originally.
Yeah.
So there's this shift in the narrative in this country. That's why for some time we'll continue to witness this. But until narrative of structures of states that should tend towards health, that should tend to health, tend to education, and all such utilities and infrastructures are well developed, we'll continue to be in this situation where the individuals, the average voter, will look up to the politician as a savior, whereas the politician is not the savior. The politicians, as it were in this country now, is the barracuda, the average politician in most cases. And we do respect to the good ones among them. The politicians is the barracuda that is sucking them, and we need to change the narrative actually.
Yeah, in changing the narrative first from the people, the ordinary man on the street, is the issue of security during the 2019 elections.
Yeah.
How? Excuse me.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Security is also very important, and this is not the first time we're going to do election. We've done it before in the past, many times. Some of them have been controversial, and some of them have been largely hailed. And if you look at it, Christian, you will see that, is it really about policing? Is it really about soldiering? Sometimes it may not be about those things. It could just be about somebody being conscientious, somebody thinking of the whole as against the South. It happened in 2015, where one man just said, no, I concede defeat. Okay? And there was peace. So there was no question of anybody going to court or any of those things happened. Something simple happened. I considered defeat, and there was peace. Okay? And we moved on. So we should expect that in 2015, something similar may happen. And if something similar does not even happen, let's have this general belief, this general understanding that election is not warfare. Election is not warfare. Election is just a procedure.
Well, it's a procedure,
people,
Dr.
Right.
Abiodun Adeniyi.
That's fine, yeah.
I know if we extend this program, you're there, to give very, very insightful,
Thank you very much,
submissions and
Thank
the
you.
rest. Your acumen in all of these areas is in no doubt at all. Dr. Abiodun
I appreciate
Adeniyi,
it. Thank you.
a lecturer at Bayes University,
Thank
former World Bank consultant.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for being part of today's edition of Nigeria 2019. Well, that's it for this edition of the program. Join us again for a fresh edition. I am Christian Ogodo. And from all the team here in Abuja, goodbye and thank you for watching.